Hi Navrongo, this is Susan. This is a short video to recapture what we covered on the call. For some reason, the video our actual call video, the audio was not recorded. So I'm just going to make this video to help refresh your memory of what we spoke about. So as you can see, I'm logged into Quickbase as the Navrongo user. This is exactly what you will see. When you log on, you will actually see this screen. You'll find the Specimen Processing and Repository app here in red. Click on the app and it will bring you to your home screen. If you recall, we have 4 tiles at the top. Samples. Sample tile includes a list of all sample records. A sample record is essentially a record for each participant visit that captures the specimens received and the aliquots that were created and are stored or may not be stored. They may no longer be stored, but they were created, so you'll have a record of those aliquots. The aliquots tab is a list of all aliquots from all records. Shipping records will be a history of any shipments that are done. The virtual freezers is a list of all the freezers that have been configured and a list of how many open positions are remaining. So let's start with the samples. Let's go back to the sample that we created on the call, which is this sample. The top section is this section where you're going to record the specimen and aliquot data, and in specific you're going to record the participant information, the visit number, the date and time collected. The time collected is in 24-hour time, so like military time. So if it's 2 p.m., it'll be 1400. All right. After you record this information, there'll be a button that says Save and Close, which will then bring you to the specimens received. Here you will record all specimens that have been received from the clinic. It's important to note that each specimen is given a specimen ID. Each sample record is given a sample ID, and this sample ID is 001003. And for this sample record, we're going to record every specimen that is received, whether it be a blood tube or a non-blood tube, such as urine or a swab. And it's also important to note that we're going to record these based on the quantity received and the volume and what you did with those specimens. For instance, here we have a 3 ml EDTA tube where all of the specimen was sent for testing. It was not, any of it was sent for processing and to be stored. The next record is an EDTA tube, one EDTA tube of 10 mLs, and this tube is going to be processed. And we know that because we have satisfactory there. Right? Down below is where we tell Quickbase which aliquot groups are going to be created. And we need to think of this as groups because the aliquots are defined by the aliquot type, the volume, and the destination. So from this 10 ml EDTA tube that we created on the call, we broke it down in that we created 2 0.5 ml vials that we're going to go to PCR. So our aliquot type is plasma EDTA, our volume is 0.15 ml, and the destination is PCR. Unlike the next group, where it's also plasma EDTA, but it's a different volume, 0.5, and these 3 aliquots. We created 3 aliquots. We later went on and deleted one in our example, but we created 3. All 3 of these were going to be stored in the archive. Likewise, from the EDTA tube, we also created 2 vials of Buffy coat. It has a different type, a different volume, but it is going in the archive. So it's not as if we can just tell Quickbase that we want to go in and create 7 aliquots from the plasma from EDTA. We have to define each one by the type, the volume, and where it is going. If it's going directly for testing, if it's going to be stored in a specific location, like the PCR box, or if it's going to go into the general storage. If you remember, archive is the Quickbase term for general storage. So in this case, the plasma EDTA and Buffy coat are both going in the general storage box. After we create the aliquot, after we tell the system to create the aliquot, let's just create another aliquot. Let's pretend that we created, from the EDTA, we created one of our DBS cards. So we create one, and this one is going to DBS at -80. Save and close. All right. So in our example, we had already told Quickbase to create the aliquots up here. So the next step was to print. But when you first generate the group, the aliquot group, whoops, sorry, accidentally hit the wrong button. If I create this DBS, has not yet been created in Quickbase. If we scroll down to our inventory here, we see the plasma EDTAs for the archive, the PCR, and the Buffy coat, but we don't actually see the DBS because the aliquot has not yet been created and added to the inventory list. Now, the inventory list does not necessarily mean that the aliquots are stored. It just means that the records have been created and we can print labels for them. So we have one DBS card now that's going to be stored in the DBS -80. And if we move to the right under aliquot actions and select create aliquots, now we will see that the DBS has been added to the aliquot inventory. It's not until the aliquots have been created that you can print aliquot labels and store them. So now that the aliquots have been created, we can go here and say print aliquot labels. If you recall, we have several different ways to print aliquot labels. If I select the print aliquots here next to the aliquot group, it will print all the labels, one label for each aliquot that was created in this group. So if I only wanted to print the DBS aliquot label, I could print it here. If you look down below at the aliquot inventory, we have print aliquot labels here. If I select print aliquot labels here, it will print one label for every aliquot in the inventory. If I only wanted to print one aliquot label for one vial, I would go to the vial in the inventory section, and I would click on the vial, and I would say print aliquot label here. While here, I can also select edit and make changes to this specific aliquot. I can change the aliquot volume. Let's say for some reason this ended up not being 200 microliters, but 300 microliters. If I decided to save it not in the archive, but in a different box for some reason, or different location, I could change that. All right. If for some reason the aliquot was sent for testing and removed from the freezer, I would select tested. All right. And I can save and close. All right. Go back to my aliquots, my record. And now, when we scroll down, we'll see this Buffy coat is 300 microliters. It did not change up here because originally we created it at 200 microliters. That stays the same. This was only generated to create the aliquots, but we edited this individual aliquot here. Let's now assign these two Buffy coats to a freezer. We do that by going up to the aliquot section and say assign to freezer. This screen is telling us that we have selected two aliquots. None of them are currently stored. Two are unstored. I will select the freezer where I want them to be stored. We know that we wanted to store them in the general storage freezer. And so we're going here to the training general storage freezer. It has 323 open positions. We're going to ask Quickbase to find us all the boxes that have open positions. It's going to give us a drop-down list of the boxes that have open positions. I highly suggest that you always select the first available box. This will keep your freezer organized in a very more compact and efficient manner. Quickbase will select positions of the first available within a box. So if we select box 1 and say save, it will now say that it assigned these two aliquots into rack 1, box 1, positions 2 and 3 of the general storage box. Return to Quickbase. We scroll down and we see now these two aliquots are in the training general storage freezer box, box 1, position 2 and 3. Now, on the call, someone suggested, what if we wanted to edit this? What we would do is we would select the pencil next to there, and it brings us back to the same edit screen that we saw just a minute ago, where we changed the volume of the other aliquot from 200 to 300. And here we could either change the freezer position by storing it in a different box. Let's say we made a mistake and this was supposed to have gone into a totally different box. Then we could change the box position. We could say, instead of putting in box 1, I want to put it in box 2. And then in this case, we would have to select which position in the box. All the positions in this box are currently black. Let's say if we wanted to go back to box number 1, hold on, let me just go back for a second so I can show you more easily. Let's edit this. Let's say I wanted to change this into a different position within this same box. You'll notice that box 1, 2, and 3 are not listed because they are currently filled. If I were to change it to a different box that also had samples currently assigned to them, those current filled positions would be red. So you only can select a position in which the color of the position is black. So if we wanted to change this to box number 2, position 1, say save and close, it would make the change here. If I wanted to remove an aliquot from a freezer completely, then I could do just select here, remove from freezer, and say save. Okay. Let me refresh this, make sure that. Okay. We can do the same thing for the DBS. So that is how we add sample records, add specimens, create aliquot groups, assign aliquots to a freezer, and view the aliquots. What I didn't, and now I'll show you, remember we were going to print a report? By selecting the print the sample report, it gives you a summary of the visit information, all the aliquots and where they're stored. This is a very handy report for you to print when you're taking samples to the archive, so you know exactly which box to put them in. If you recall, each aliquot is given a very specific ID number that will appear on the label. We expect that aliquot ID to be stored in this box, in this position. They cannot be moved, even though they're going in the same box, and they're from the same record. We don't want them to be transposed, that each unique aliquot goes into a unique position based on where they're assigned. Okay, let's see if I can get out of this. Oops. Go back to the sample record. The other thing I want to show you is, what if I wanted to save these aliquots into Excel? How would I do that? You can go here under the aliquot inventory to more and say save as a spreadsheet, right? It will then go, oops, it'll save them to your, wherever you're going to save your records. Mine happens to go to my downloads folder. Let's see if I can. And it saved them into an Excel format. Now these samples, these aliquots were saved from within the record, so it's only the aliquots from this one visit. What if I had a lot of visits? I would go to the aliquots tab, and I can do the same thing. I can look for the word more in the drop-down list and save it as a spreadsheet, and it will give me a spreadsheet of all the aliquots in the entire list. However, if you look on the left-hand side, we have the ability to filter the list. What if I only wanted to look at the plasma EDTA samples? You can click on the plasma EDTA under aliquot type, and it will filter for only those aliquots. You can add to that and say, what if I only want the ones that are in the general storage archive freezer destination, and it will narrow it again. Or a specific freezer. You can do that. Use the filters to narrow the list or broaden the list based on what, and remove the filters by clicking the X. All right. And we save to a spreadsheet by saying save to a spreadsheet under more. You could also print the list under more and say print. If you want to email this list to yourself or to someone, you can select email type in their email address and say send, and it will send them a link to the list. All right. Let's go back to the samples for a second, and let's look at the sample that I originally created for the training. And this sample, I just want to review again the specimens received. So here we have the EDTA 1 vial, 1 3 ml tube that was satisfactory. We know that that vial was processed because we used the, I'm going to say edit this so you can see. Under the comments section, our options are satisfactory, test it per protocol, if it was broken, insufficient volume, mislabeled, and if there's a reason why, something you wanted to comment about that's not in the list, you can say add new choice. But if a sample is received in the lab and sent directly for testing, and none of the aliquot is stored in an aliquot vial and saved, then we would say that, but let me say that again. If none of the aliquot is going to be processed and stored for future use, then it's probably gone out for testing, the entire aliquot. But if any part of that aliquot is going to be used to be stored, then we need to comment on the condition of that vial. And so most of the time it will be satisfactory. Sometimes, you'll have wanted to use the vial, but you're unable to because of a negative reason. Maybe it was hemolyzed, or there wasn't enough specimen to do the processing, or maybe it was leaking and broken, or you rejected it for some reason and requested a redraw, or it got broken during the processing when it was centrifuged. So this is where we're going to capture those types of events. You do have the option to create a new comment yourself if something, you need to annotate a situation that's not listed here. All right. So let's create an aliquot. Let's add a specimen just so we can remember how to do this. Our sample ID remains the same. Let's say that we got, for some reason, you got a BACTEC sample, all right? And the quantity received in the BACTEC is about 50 mLs, and you received 1. In this case, it was tested per protocol because it's a culture. It's not going to be processed right away. So in that case, that's all you would need to do, because we're not going to create aliquots for it at this point, and we don't have an inventory. But what if the lab sent over an additional serum tube that they wanted to do in a different, to be stored? What if they also sent over 1 5 ml tube and it was satisfactory and you accepted it? Then you would record it as 1 5 ml tube, which is different than the 10 ml tube that we've already received. Then you could go in and create the aliquots. And let's say in this case, you got serum from this aliquot. You created serum. You aliquoted it as an ml. And you created 3. And for this aliquot, it also went, what if they were all going to go to a serology for some reason? There's a special box that's set aside for serology. So you say save and close. So now we have our 3 1 mLs that are going to be set aside in the destination for serology. I could then create the aliquots, right? And then I could assign them to a freezer location. I would find my, I don't have a serology box, but let's say that the serology box was in general storage. Go to rack 1 and say save, back to Quickbase, right? So now you can see that we received the serum, 5 mLs. We added them to our list. We selected the create button, and now they appear here. And now I can assign them to, they are assigned to the freezer, right? If I wanted to reassign all 3 of these, I could select assign freezer again. And it says, I have 3 aliquots. 3 aliquots are stored. None are unstored. Would you like to reassign my stored aliquots? I can say yes. Select a different freezer section. Let's say that these are I want to move them to the mag pix serum box. I would say find open positions in box 1 and save. It has now moved them to the mag pix serum box, positions 1, 2, and 3. So again, you can always assign or reassign the entire group by assigned positions and print the aliquots for the entire group, and they will appear. To do it individually, you highlight the individual aliquot and select the edit button, and you can do the same thing from here. Edit the aliquot specific information, print an individual aliquot, and also delete an individual aliquot. Let's say I anticipated having these 3 aliquots, but in reality, after processing it, we only received 2 aliquots. Then I would go here and say delete aliquot. Okay? I'm deleting aliquot number 688A. I'm going to say delete aliquot. Save and close. And now I only have 2 aliquots, 689 and 690. If I scroll up here to my aliquots groupings that I created, you can see that for this aliquot, the 3 serum aliquots that we created, I requested Quickbase to give me 3. Under column number of aliquots created were 3. Under column number of aliquots deleted, 1. Number of aliquots remain is 2. And number of aliquots currently stored is 2. And that's exactly what happened. I initially told Quickbase I needed 3 aliquots. In the lab, and I went in and I created the 3 aliquots. I stored the 3 aliquots. But then in reality, in the lab, I realized that I only created 2. So to reconcile this record, I must go in and delete the missing aliquot of serum. So I found the aliquot ID label that was not used in the lab. I selected the edit button, the pencil on the left, which is the edit button, and I found the delete aliquot. And I deleted it, and I said save and close, and it removed it from the record. And it removed it from the freezer. In reality, in the lab, I would suggest that you not assign aliquots to a freezer until after all this processing has been done. So then you can go in and reconcile any aliquots that have not been created in the lab prior to signing them to the freezer. Because what has happened now is these two aliquots that are left are in the MagPix serum box in positions 2 and 3. And box 1, position 1, is empty. And that's not good freezer management. You would like to not have empty spaces in your freezer boxes. So in reality, what I would do is I would create my aliquots groups and then create the aliquots so they appear in the inventory, print the labels, take the labels to the lab, apply the labels to your aliquot cryo vials, and then process the samples, fill all the vials that you have product for, and then see which vials have labels on them that have no product. Those are the ones you need to come back and delete because they do not have any serum or plasma or anything else in them to be stored. They were unfilled vials. This is a very important concept for you to understand and for you to make sure that you resolve for every record, because we don't want to have aliquots in the system that do not exist. Okay, so to delete an aliquot, we select the edit button next to the aliquot, and in the center of the page we select delete aliquot, and then we say save and close. All right, so when you print this, go back to the top, when we print our sample record, when we print the sample record and we take this record with us to the freezer, we want to make sure that we only have aliquots assigned to freezer positions that we physically have vials to store. If you notice that you have aliquots assigned to a freezer but you don't have a vial to put in the box, you need to go back and reconcile that vial. See if the vial is still in the lab and needs to be added to the freezer, or was the aliquot never created? And if so, you want to make sure you look for that aliquot ID and delete the correct aliquot. You can't just delete any aliquot. You need to create the one that you do not have the label for. All right, that's very important that you understand the concept of the unique aliquot ID is a specific record within the system and is assigned to a specific freezer. They're not interchangeable. All right. I think that covers everything. And you are using the training RV466 protocol, and the site is training RV466. I'm going to log out of here and show you that when you are switched over to the Navrongo, when you go and are switched over to the Navrongo full user, that it will look the same. You have this freezers will now no longer say training. It is your Navrongo freezers. You have a freezer configured for urine, Paxgen, minus 80 dBs, and room temp dBs at the bottom, serum, general storage, whole blood ETTA, MagPix serum, and swabs. This matches exactly what is in the training. It's just the training data will not be mixed with your real data. When you start working on the real protocol, we will switch you over out of the training and into your Navrongo actual data. Okay, let's go to samples, and I'm going to say add a new sample just so you can see that the site name is no longer Training RV466, it is Navrongo, and the protocol is no longer Training RV466, it is RV466. So once you start using the protocol, you will no longer have the be in training. You will be here, and all the data will be live, and it will be real. Okay? So I'm going to cancel this because this is not real. And that's it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me and let me know. If you want to do another training, let me know and we can schedule that. All right. Thank you very much. You guys were a great group to work with. You had really good questions. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.